practices, but we all learn, we all learn shortcuts as we gain experience. And I'll say that shortcuts are installation technique refinements for people who know their craft and the code requirements of their trade. Tile roof components allow less experienced people to benefit from those refinements by design. So what we're really talking about is making it easier for experienced people and making it possible for less experienced people to get traction up on the roof right away. I actually adjusted this presentation a little bit because of the level of experience and knowledge that we have here. I don't want to be rudimentary, but I do want to share some of my insights. We have 9 people from Boral, from top level technical trainers, salespeople, sales managers, and people in the executive offices. Boral, a Westlake company, I should say, congratulations on that. We also have 9 from Eagle Roofing Products from across the country. We have Jonathan Gothard from Ludowici in Ohio, and Saul, Richard, and Amy, and Charles, you're down there in Florida. I think this will still be valuable to you, but I do want to remind you that you're covered by the Florida Building Code and the High Wind Florida Roofing Contractors Association and Tile Roofing Industry Alliance manual. So that's the one state covered by a different manual. Carlos at White Star Roofing down south of Houston. Davin Rich, award-winning Davin Rich, I'll say, congratulations, in Yuma. David Figueroa is president of Red Mountain Roofing in Mesa. They've sent a ton of people through our training program. Thanks, David. Inspector Paul down in Tucson. Appreciate you being on, Paul. Jaime in Orange, California. Mindy Dahlquist from TRA Sun and Solar in Salt Lake City, just south of us. Lisa and I are up in Southern Idaho, and our Tile Roof Industry Alliance Executive Director, Rick Olson, is in Oregon. So I'll tell you one thing, like I said, I'm using a lot of pictures today. There won't be a lot of words on the slides. We're going to go very quickly because I want to cover as much information as possible, and I think the experience level on the call is going to easily digest that. That said, Lisa's going to create a virtual handout of these links, and you'll be able to download that when we're done. And I say when we're done because it won't be complete until we're done. I expect there to be some input from you and possible links that you can add to it. It's the nice thing about the recording, we can adjust and edit and add things afterwards. So this will be up there for in perpetuity. So we want to make sure that we have anything that you think, speaking to our manufacturer reps, is important to include. So we're going to take an approach looking at the project management triangle, and the rule of thumb is that you can get 2 out of 3. It's speed, cost, and quality. And so that means if someone says, I want it done now, they're making their two choices. They're saying one of them, I want speed, I want it done now, but I also don't want to pay a lot. So that means he's going to get a low quality outcome. He's going to get it fast, and it's not going to cost him a lot, but it's going to be a low quality outcome. We might say, I want it done right, and I want it done right now, which in this time right now is a very tough ask. But the reality is, if you want it done right and you want it done right now, it's going to be expensive. That's going to be the cost is one thing you won't be able to control as easily, but you're going to get a good job. You're going to get the quality. That is a Ludowici roof on Duke University, a fantastic job about 3 years ago, I think, down in Raleigh, North Carolina. So when it comes to tile roof components, we say that they enhance the quality of the roof by increasing the function and longevity. So when we use words like quality, function, and longevity, we're obviously in the tile component of the project management triangle. So we're talking 100% there about the benefits to the building owner: longer life, lower maintenance, energy savings, improved aesthetics. There's all kinds of benefits that come with tile roofing components. The contractor and maybe even the homeowner will look at it, at this project management triangle, and say, well, you're telling me we're going to provide quality, function, and longevity. That means it's either going to be expensive, or it's going to take more time, or it's just going to be impossible to deliver at the speed and cost that this person wants. And what I want to show today is that that's completely wrong. And the reason it's completely wrong is because we're only looking at that project management triangle and the equation from the perspective of what we're delivering to the homeowner, which is really great. I don't mean to ignore that today, but what I want to do is talk about us. And when I say us, I mean the tile roof contractors and installers, and speak to how components help us with the ease of installation, reduce the number of callbacks, can help us standardize our practices and training within our company. It provides us line items for our invoices, for increased billing when it comes to our repairs and sometimes our actual, complete roof installs. And then if we make a mistake on the roof, if we have a problem, the mistakes are not going to be as painful because the tile roof components help compartmentalize and help facilitate avoiding damage on the roof. There was a recent Roofing Contractor magazine article, a focus on labor. And if you ask anybody today what the biggest challenge is in construction, let alone roofing, it would be labor. We can't get enough labor. We can't get experienced labor. And second is probably supply chain. So, what we're saying in the roofing industry is we can't find people to put on the products we can't get. It almost is a problem that cuts itself out of being a problem. But in looking at Suprema, they were the sponsor of this. Now, Suprema is a commercial company, but there was something about what they said, or at least part of what they said. I highlighted the words that I thought were important to our component talk today. I pulled them out. And I added 2 words at the end. The labor shortage is why creating products that provide time and labor savings, that combine steps, providing similar application methods to eliminate excess labor, and my ad is smart. That's what we do when we buy components. We're actually buying the reduction of labor needed. And so they make our life easier. It also makes less experienced labor capable of doing work that we want done up on the roof. So let's rip through some of these components. We're not going to see all of them today, and I hope you'll add ones you think are important and send those to us. But we're going to look at batten extenders, a raised batten system, weather blocking and where we can do ridge venting, flexible flashing, which is really common now, replacing lead as a component in roofing and tile roofing. Components are both a proposal and an invoice line item. We'll look at that. Layout tape, something that can speed up layout and make it a little more, ensure a better outcome. And then anything else from you all, use that question feature on the GoToWebinar. So first, let's take a look at batten extenders. And these components are not in the order of value or importance. They're in an order that I just thought for less experienced people, we kind of see a progression. But again, we've got a very experienced group of people on the line today. So batten extenders, what do? They support cut tile, and they ensure space for the water flow underneath the tile. So if we look at what would be maybe a typical installation in Southern California where there's no battens being used, we've got a low profile tile with a continuous lug, and we've got a pan flashing that's designed to run the water down the roof and encapsulate it in that pan flashing until it gets to the gutter. Well, this tile and that pan flashing have a problem with each other, and what unfortunately happens a lot is a roofer might just smudge, push, crunch down that raised hem on the flashing. That's very important to facilitating the water getting off the roof. So obviously we don't want to do that. Other times the roofer may take his hammer, and I've done this on new construction when we're dealing with fresh new tile. You might take your claw hammer on a framing type hammer and chunk out the weather check on the tile. I've reverted to cutting. We've seen issues where we can put fracture lines or fractures in that tile that they'll develop later and be breaks. So once that tile is down where we want it, we're able to put a fastener through that pre-punched hole in the tile. But when we get to our second row, now we're looking upslope, you can see that our offset tile, our half tile, if we put a fastener in that hole, it's going to go right through the pan flashing, and we can't do that. So we're going to have to wire tie that tile. We're going to have to do something to secure it so it doesn't slide in that pan flashing. Even if we're using 1x2 battens on the roof, we still can't run those battens right out into the pan flashing. So we're still dealing with figuring out how to attach that tile. And sometimes we'll use adhesive, concrete adhesive, or concrete and clay adhesive. But you can see that the tile is still drooping. So it's going to fight against making a good connection there. It's going to be a little bit disheveled, and eventually it may slide. If the adhesive doesn't make a good bond before the tile is set, it may slide down. And then Inspector Paul will be pointing that out in his reports. Another challenge with the cut tile, which we see at the sidewalls where they need to be supported, or at the valleys, is that once you've cut a tile, it's a lot harder to use any kind of a hammer or slate tool to chip out the weather check. You're more likely to break or fracture the tile. So at that point, you often have to cut them to do that. So one solution is a batten extension or a batten extender. And if you look at this one, you see that there's actually 3 pre-drilled holes in the batten extender. This is a 10-inch batten extender. And the first several inches are kind of a U shape, and that U shape fit over the top of the batten. So I typically put in 2 fasteners in a fastener in 2 of the holes and fasten it over the top. You can see from the side down in the red box how that U shape fits over. And then the extension goes into the pan flashing, and there's a couple little legs that keep the plastic part of the batten extender up in the air. And when we set a tile on it, the lug is able to fully engage on that batten extender, so we don't have the same problem with sliding. And if we were going to use adhesive to bond that to the adjacent properly fastened tile, that tile is going to be lifted up in a position where that adhesive will make good contact. And clearly you can see there's plenty of space for the water to flow underneath the tile. So that's a 10-inch batten extender, and we've also got 18-inch batten extenders, and those are made for our valleys. They're the same, they're just longer. And again, you can see that we're installing a concrete tile on a 1x2 batten, and the batten has to stop at the flashing, and the tile then actually droops into the valley trough. And as you roofers know, this is the easier side of the valley where the underlock of the preceding tile helps support our tile. It's even more challenging on the other side where we're coming out of the valley and those tiles just want to drop flat down into the valley. So if we install a batten extender, same 2 fasteners that we used before on the sidewall, extend it out into the valley flashing, the little feet and legs keep it up in the air. The 18-inch extends right out to the center of the valley, and then we can put our tile and rest it on that. And you can see the nice even plane of the surface of the tile. That's going to make a difference in the aesthetics from the ground in all of those tile. And then in addition, you can see the cavity between the flashing and the bottom of the tile. So we're not going to have the same issues with the blockage of tile. For us, it's very common on that standard tile valley with the hem or the return, very common in the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, where tile roofs were installed with low profile tile, which is very common up there. And now we're seeing low profile be more common across the country, that modern look. And so we get a call for a leak repair and go out and find that there was nothing done other than the valley tile just laying there in the valley. So our role in a repair like that is we go out and we solve the problem. We find the blockage, we will replace, pick up the tile, clean it out, and install maybe 3 or 4 rows of batten extenders. And we'll send the homeowner a picture like this. Maybe we'll throw in a debris screen if there's a tree around that helped contribute to that. But now we're going to solve that problem for them immediately. We've got our repair call, our service call, and we charge them for the products that we installed. And then we'll send them this picture along with the invoice and tell them, hey, tomorrow I'm going to send you a proposal to finish that valley all the way up the rest of the 20 feet and the other 4 valleys on your roof. We'll give you a proposal if you want to go ahead and upgrade that. The pictures we'll send them will be the debris blocking the valley, the debris cleaned, and the batten extenders installed. And it's fundamentally obvious the benefit to a homeowner. So those proposals typically result in a pretty good repair job. So now those are batten extenders that help keep the water up out of the tile. John Campbell had said to me once, we always joke that roofers only need to know that water runs downhill and payday's on Friday. And John always says that water runs downhill and don't get in its way. And so the batten extenders and the raised battens are along the same lines beneficial to the roofer. So we're going to look at counter battens, which raise up the horizontal battens, the EBS, the boral elevated batten system, arched battens, which is the eagle system that allows the same type of airflow and moisture and condensation to run downslope. And we'll look at some of the vented eave risers and the bird blocking at the eave. So first, if we look on the regular manual's low slope ventilated eave roof eave detail, you'll see that there's a lot of components or parts of that system. We have it on under low slope because under 312 it'd be required to have a counter batten system or a raised batten system. So you've got, like in the Northwest, we see a lot of lath put down vertically with horizontal 1x3s or 4s. And those systems actually do pretty well. The airspace is very helpful. But you're installing verticals, you've got horizontals, you've got the little eave detail where we're bringing the air in. There's really 3 components, 3 parts to a raised batten system. which encompasses raised batten, encompasses counter battens, EBS, arched battens, anything that takes those horizontal battens up off of the roof deck, blocking water flow. We've got our air intake to draw air in. We've got our exhaust to allow that air to exit up at the top. That creates convection, so we get airflow underneath the horizontal battens and underneath the tile. And we also get the benefit of drainage, so that if we have a branch breaks a tile before we can get up there and repair it, that water can get off the roof. If we have a severe storm that blows water past the tile for a short period of time, that water can get off the roof. In cold, humid environments where moisture-laden air goes underneath the tile and then it cools down at night and it condenses, that condensation can run down and get off of the roof. So there's advantages to this counterbatten system. The challenge with it is that if you look at all the arrows and the description and the training it takes to get somebody to do it right, it looks like there was a cowboy and Indian fight. So that's a lot of direction, and today components reduce that to the 3 parts. We have our intake vents, which are integrated into your EAVE riser metal. They're installed the same way that your normal EAVE riser metal is installed, except there's ventilation. There's the ability for air to flow in. We have our exhaust vents, which can be the horizontal ridge lines with, or even the hips with rolled vented material for weather blocking. Also, O'Hagan vents or roof vents can be used to exhaust that air up high. And then we have some type of batten system that raises the horizontal battens up off the roof deck and allows for airflow and drainage underneath the tile and underneath the batten. So really we've got 3 main parts to a raised batten, an above sheeting ventilation system, and the 3 components are things that we're already installing in one form or another. If we look at the installation of one of these systems, you can see this is a Boral EBS system. The battens are able to be extended right out into the pan flashing. You can see down there at the EAVE, there's a ventilated EAVE riser. You see the small weep hole, you can see the white metal through it, but then you can see the elongated ovals, and those are the air intakes for the underlying above sheeting ventilation system. So, but if we look at those battens that are extended out into the pan flashing, we would think, oh, that would block the water flow if we didn't know what we were looking at. But the reality is those EBS battens can extend out there because they're supported by the little black riser. And look at the smoothness of the top of the tile. You know, that's just not the way it works if we're propping, wire tying, and gluing tile together over there. That smoothness will transmit across, especially with low profile, especially with slate surface. You see deviations in that. So having that support is critical both for the aesthetics and also the function to keep that batten up out of the water flow. Same thing over at the valley. The battens are able to extend all the way out into the valley and out in the middle of the field. Same thing, the battens are raised up, so that's going to ensure our airflow and downslope drainage ability for any moisture or condensation that gets underneath the tile. Same thing with the Eagle arch battens. We've got the ventilated EAVE riser. The battens are able to be fastened to the deck. You can see that at the sidewall, the same thing, the tile is in a nice even plane from where it's above the roof deck on the batten to where it's above the flashing on the batten. There's room for the water to flow down through the pan flashing. Same at the valleys, the water can flow down the valley flashing underneath the tile. The tile won't be blocking the water flow. And out in the middle of the field, the same, we've got airflow and water flow drainage that can go down slope and air that will be part of convection that helps with our above sheeting ventilation system. One thing you might have noticed in the pictures is that there's not a gap in between the ends of the battens. So a couple things, we can install 8-foot long, 10-foot long. These battens that are raised up off the deck can be as long as you want. Typically they're 4 and 8 feet, but we're restricted with 1x2s direct to the deck to only 4 feet, and we're required to have a gap in between those battens. So we're not required to have that gap. It's kind of funny, if you go out and look at some of these installations, you will see that either by habit and partially by not understanding the reason for that requirement, you'll see roofers providing that gap in these raised batten systems. It's not a big deal. It's just something to point out that understanding the why of things is very helpful. So in this case, it's just important to realize we don't have to have that gap. One of the reasons is that, when you're working directly with a homeowner, they may not understand the reason for that gap either, and they may have a question with it if there's anything that looks inconsistent. So if there's a great consistent spacing, a finger that's put between the batten that's the same finger, or a 1x2 that's turned on edge that provides that half-inch gap. But if they're random like this, it is something that might draw attention to them, and it's just very difficult up on the roof to keep all of those rows in line. We don't have to, it's not required that the spacing be in line. But when we see something this random, like you see here, it's something that you might have a question from the homeowner about. So that's a lot of information about with the batten extenders and the raised batten systems. But what they allow us to avoid doing is no more knocking out lugs with a hammer, no more wire tying the tile because of the valleys or the sidewall flashings. We won't have any more drooping tile at the sidewalls. We won't have drooping tile into the valleys blocking the water flow. We'll have no sliding tile due to failed adhesive because the tile are actually able to engage with the batten. We won't have broken tile due to us fracturing them when we're modifying the tile so that it can fit around our flashing. We won't have leaks from improperly installed battens because the roofer knows, hey, I got to support my tile, so I'm going to go block the flashing to support my tile so it looks good at the pan or at the valley, same detail. Those can be, really horrendous leaks that are drawing water back in underneath the tile. So we avoid that. So all of the benefits to the building owner are still there. Longer life, lower maintenance, the energy savings, the increased aesthetics. And as a contractor, if you're a contractor, talk to your manufacturer sales rep of the product that you're going to be using and selling. They've got the literature, they have the knowledge and understanding of their specific product, the features and benefits, and let them help you sell that product with the knowledge that they have to your customer, because it will benefit your customer. And your manufacturer technical reps are also available to help you with training. There's some great programs, and they're eager to help you train yourself or your people to properly install the components. But I like to say that I buy components to make my job easier. I sell components to make the roof better. So there's a benefit in both. The components make my job easier as an installer, but they also make the roof better. So if the homeowner is willing to help pay for some parts and pieces that make my job easier, I'm all in. So the benefits to the contractor, that ease of installation, fewer callbacks, standardizing the practices and training in your company, the invoice line items, helping with increased billing, or at least being able to bill for the things that you're actually doing out there on the roof. And the mistakes can be less painful. And again, we'll have good links in the handout for you to follow up. But think about it this way too. After the dry-in, so we get our underlayment down. We're all done with our underlayment. Now it's time to start the process of shifting into tile mode. To train a new employee, for someone to go up on a typical roof with underlayment installed, and you're going to install 1x2 battens direct to the deck. You want to teach them layout, and then they're going to chalk lines, and then they're going to fasten the battens on those lines. They're going to have to end space the battens. They need to know that that's a requirement to end space them a minimum of a ½ inch. They need to know not to use battens longer than 4 feet. They need to know not to put the battens in the pan. Don't put the battens in the valley. Don't put fasteners into the pan flashing. Don't put fasteners into the valley flashing when you're trying to secure a tile. At the sidewalls, you've got to prop or chunk or cut or glue or wire tie the tile so they don't slide, droop, or block the water flow. And the same at the valleys. If you want those tile to look nice and level, you've got to prop or chunk out the tile or glue it, wire tie it so they don't slide or droop and block the water flow also. So those are all the things you need to know if you're going to do a direct to the deck with 1x2 battens and to keep the proper water flow in your flashings. But if you're using a raised batten system, there are all these other benefits that it provides to the homeowner. But as far as training your employees, even if they don't know about those benefits, the training boils down to layout, chalk lines, fasten battens on the lines. And that simplicity allows a roofer with less experience to be utilized on the roof sooner. So let's take a look now at weather blocking and exhaust fitting. We've covered the intake We've covered the raised battens and how they affect and provide airflow, but also they provide an abundance of water capability of flowing in the flashings underneath and keeping the tile in an aesthetic manner, nice and smooth and level without being drooping and falling in. Now we're going to look up at the top part of the roof with our weather blocking and exhaust venting, our vented self-adhering rolls, the O'Hagan roof vents, weather blocking and its impermeable self-adhering rolls, and also plastic rigid material. So there's a variety of different products out there. These are both the Boral and the Eagle products. TRA, Sun and Solar, they're on the call today. They also make a variety of products. There are products out there that will help you move more quickly up on the roof. And a lot of times as we move away and see a stronger moving away from concrete or mortar weather blocking in a lot of markets, these products can be super helpful. So let's look at this roll from Eagle. You see the white is a release strip, and there's a sticky strip underneath there, and that roll will fit over the ridge nailer board. It'll form over perfectly. There's kind of creases in there. You just push it down. It makes a nice angle down. The perforations will allow air to migrate out, which will be the draw for our under sheathing or under tile ventilation, above sheathing ventilation. But those perforations will also resist wind-driven weather and rain once installed. The bottom where the sticky strip is kind of corrugated, or it's got an up and down nature to it. And what that allows is we avoid the stretching of the material, because that ability to feather that out over the low parts and the high parts, where it has to go a little farther and a little less far, that will stop the installer from actually stretching out the material and having it kind of resist sticking to the tile. And once that's installed and we put our ridge cap on, the material stays in the shade and you really don't even know that it's there. But they're color coded. There's a variety of different colors and a variety of different products that you can find that will help you there. This is the Boral product. It's a figure roll, vented product. And one thing I like about that is as a person who does a lot of repairs and works alone, I can put a hammer tack in one end of it, roll it out 10 or 15 feet and pull it snug and put a tack in the other end. And so it's, I don't have to fight with it at all. I'm not moving along slowly like with mortar or with plastic. And then in addition, you see that this is a mock-up, but I'm done on the right side, but on the back side, I'll probably just dry it in for the night and come back tomorrow. So on the right side, I can go ahead and pull the release strip off and seal that weather blocking down. And so I'm dried in for the night, and I'm able to leave that side of the roof finished, know that I'm half done, and tomorrow I'll come back and finish that back side. That's about how much squares I do in a day now, about 1 1/4 when I'm working on a mock-up. But it's just the same on a big roof. Another way to use those rolls is, in our market in the Pacific Northwest, we're required to have raised battens. The cool, humid climate is an area that really benefits from the raised batten systems, because we have a real moss and algae growth issue. And with that air movement, the tile dry out much more quickly. The underlayment stays a more consistent temperature and stays damp for a less amount of time. So we want to make sure that we have ventilation at our head walls also, not just at our hip and ridge. So I will take some of the high profile, the roll roofing or roll weather blocking made for high profile tile, and just cut it in half right down the center. And then I can fasten it or secure it to the head wall, and then stick it. There's a release strip on there, stick it down to the tile, and then put my roof to wall flashing over the top of that. And again, the weather blocking kind of disappears into the shade, but we've got protection from wind-driven rain, and we've got our ventilation up there. So we can also exhaust the air through regular vents in the tile roofing. And so in this case, you see that there's plastic weather blocking up above, and we're using O'Hagan vents to actually exhaust the air from as part of our above sheeting ventilation program. So the O'Hagan vents, you guys are familiar with these. There are one vent replaces 2 full tile. We can paint them to match the tile color. What I like about products like this is, as a salesperson, I use the manual. The manual gives me credibility. The manual is the credibility for the tile roofing industry. If you're not referring to the manual, you just can't be a tile roofer, because it is the Bible of tile roofing and of the installation. So you see that the O'Hagan provides the deck flashing and the tile level flashing, and that's just like the manual. So if I'm sitting down and doing a presentation, I'm able to show them those types of details and show them the products I'm going to be using. It helps me later when we get to the point of maybe competing with somebody, and they realize, the customer can realize, I'm following the rules, I'm doing what we're supposed to be doing, and I'm backed up by the industry and by my manufacturer that endorses that manual. Okay, up at the ridge, there's times where we don't need ventilation out of the ridge. Maybe we're using the O'Hagan vents, or maybe we just don't have a ventilated system. There are also self-adhered weather blocking rolls, a variety of different types. The brown there, that's the crown roof tile. You can see the two different colors up there in the middle, and then another one of the Boral products on the right. And those are all impermeable, solid weather blocking that will go on before your ridge tile or your trim tile goes on, and they'll reduce any chance of wind-driven weather getting underneath your tile roof. Another way that's become more common, I'm seeing it spread across the country to more markets, is the plastic weather blocking. This is a Verde product, and they're out of Phoenix, and they make weather blocking for every profile and manufacturer that I'm familiar with, and they also make the plastic weather blocking for the hip and ridge, which is a pretty neat detail. So a variety of different components for weather blocking, from vented to rigid like the plastic, and solid rolls that are impermeable. So next we're going to look at flexible flashing, and this is really something that has evolved. I don't know, in the last 10 years we've gone from seeing it used sparingly to seeing it used very heavily. It's a lead replacement product as we move away from using lead up on the roof. It can be used for step flashing, for transition flashings, which is transitioning water from under the tile to back to the surface of the tile. And at those points, we're going to use anti-pond foam. And also soaker flashings, big flashing where a valley terminates on the roof. Say there's a dormer and the valley terminates on the roof, and we need to pick up that water and make sure we put it on top of the tile downslope. We're also going to use some anti-ponding there. And then flashing junctures, places where our flashing meets, maybe two valleys on two different slopes meet up at a peak. We'll look at that. So again, there are a variety of different products. You've got crown roof tile. They make Easy Form. Wakaflex is made by Boral, a Westlake company, and Eagle Roofing Products has the Secure Roll. And all of these products work great for the transition flashings and step flashings and all kinds of details on the roof. The example of step flashing, it's important to understand that with tile roofing, it's going to be different than shingles, shakes, slate, because we're not a two-ply roof like those are. We don't overlap, more than 50%, and the step flashing are not going to be hidden from the surface of the roof like they are with those products. You can see on the left, that's a 1915 Ludowici tile installation that I had maintained for a long time. Was part of a restoration project in 2017 where the entire roof was lifted and about 85% of it relaid. The failure point, if you can say the failure point in a 100-year-old roof, was the sidewalls of the chimneys and the second story buildings. And they had used pan flashings, and they'd been a problem. The long-term maintenance guy said from about 70 years old on, they became a problem. So he'd been around a while, and the consultant and the building owners decided, let's go back with step flashing. That looks like a good alternative. So that's what they did. They went back with step flashing. It's a kind of a bulletproof detail that stops water from going underneath the tile on purpose, avoids the whole transition and water running in the pan underneath the tile. For inaccessible details like this was on a third story on about a 912, long ways from the ground. They didn't want to have maintenance people getting up there. They chose step flashing. On the right side, you see a lead step flashing installation that I did about 10 years ago. You can actually see the pan flashing underneath that lead. The original pan flashing installed. This roof faced the southwest of Puget Sound and would occasionally get very heavy, consistent day after day rains during the winter, and it would end up overburdening the pan flashing. And so we said, well, let's this is an ongoing problem. Let's just go ahead and put in step flashing. We put in a wall flashing and riglet flashing and sandwiched our lead, and we haven't had a problem with that since. Today I would do that with one of the flexible or malleable flashing, self-adhered flashings. So Boral has a great video for installing step flashing on a tile roof. Of course, they're using their Wacoflex in the video, but the details and the instruction is good for any product, and it's got Spanish translation on it also. You can see the roofer putting down his first piece, and as you see, there's going to be a step nature to the flashing. The best thing about a video, or the simplicity of showing this, is we need to make sure that our roofers don't see a 10-foot long piece of Wacoflex or secure roll and just stretch it out and put it over the top of the tile. And I know a lot of you have seen that. We want to do true step flashing, and this video does show that. Something else in the video up at the top is an important detail. You see where the snips are touching that plywood. It's very important with lead also, but with lead, any malleable flashing, and especially our new self-adhering flexible flashings, that they be supported. When they're on the surface of the tile like this, they're supported. We don't have a problem. We're going to adhere them right to that tile. But in this place behind upslope, if we want that water from that large piece of flexible flashing that'll be installed up there, if we want that water to make sure that water gets up on top of the tile, we're going to need to support that flashing so it doesn't droop or sag over time with expansion and contraction. So I use anti-ponding foam, and I use a lot of it for repairs. It's typically seen as an element in a raised fascia detail. You know, you have the first row of tile would droop, so that the builder raises the fascia 1.5 inches, and behind that fascia board will stick the anti-ponding foam around the entire perimeter of the house, and then the underlayment lays over that and still has positive drainage, but we don't create that ponding behind the fascia board. So now, with my great experience, I'm going to show you how I use this anti-ponding foam. You may not all get it because it's just an experienced element. I'm going to pick up the anti-ponding foam, I'm going to break it, and I'm going to shove it underneath the Wacoflex or the secure roll or the flexible flashing that we're using. It's a critical component, and this picture helps homeowners and helps people understand why it's important, and it really makes a difference. There are a ton of repairs that you could go out on and do nothing but reshape the lead or the flexible flashing and shove a piece of anti-ponding foam on, and the problem might go away. But it's just a very nice component to have in a repair vehicle truck, because I guarantee there's plenty of places where if your roofer has it, they will use it, and if they don't, they'll use something else that you may not want to have show up on a picture if the job's ever inspected by a consultant. Broken tile and different ways of supporting that material is just not as effective as something designed for that. In addition to transitions like this, we also have that transition we talked about at a dormer where the valley transitions onto the surface of the tile. Now, if we're using a low profile tile and we've got a rigid steel flashing in the valley, that rigid steel flashing can transfer onto the valley like you see from our manual picture on the top drawing there on the left. But if we're with a curvy tile, a medium or high profile tile with curves, we can't make that rigid steel flashing do what we need to do. So we're required to use a malleable soaker flashing there to transition that water onto the surface of the tile. And we want it to be large enough so that we don't put all of that combined water into one trough of the tile going down slope. Otherwise, it's going to be, you know, a fire hose of water coming down one. So we want to spread that water out into at least 2 or 3 troughs of the tile. And you can see that there's a roll of secure roll up on top. That's a typical sized roll for doing step flashings or transitions. And then down below, you can see the size of the material. That's a Wacoflex roll, but the manufacturers all make larger 18 or 20 or 24 inch rolls that you can often buy from suppliers by the lineal foot. So that, you know, typically a 2 foot by 2 foot piece will make a great soaker flashing and very easy to install. And you also don't have the concern about lead cracking, just flat out cracking or degrading. Another place we can use the flexible flashings is at the flashing junctures. So in this case, this is the type of valley metal that might be used on an asphalt shingle roof. It's very simple. There's just simply a center crown. It's not very difficult to make a couple of cuts and fold the flashing over each side, and so that you can feel pretty confident you've got a watertight seal, maybe with a little bit of adhesive or caulk right at the juncture. But for us, if we're using and seeing more use of multi-ribbed valley flashing, it's a battle to cut through that. And just cutting through it is one thing, but to actually try to make some sort of a metal forming of the two up at a peak, it's tough. So what we do is we simply cut off flush with the peak. So, another detail, something like this here, where you've got a valley coming down and splitting into two. No comments about the architect's design, but that's a place where I'm not going to trust my metal skills when I re-roof that on a 5-ribbed valley, cutting that thing up. So I'm going to cut flush with the apex of the ridge, and I'm going to then drape over once I've got that nice flush meeting of the two sides. I'm going to go right over the top of it with one of the flexible flashing materials and just form it snug around that. And once I'm covered up with my ridge tile, nobody will see that, and I'll have great confidence that that's never going to be a problem for me. Okay, we got 2 more sections. Components on your proposal and your repair invoice line items. So this is a little bit salesy, but I want you to see how our QuickBooks looks and how we work. When we go out and do a repair, like I say, we don't go out and give estimates for repairs. We gather an estimate when we're there doing an emergency repair, but we go out and we do the repair. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to have my service call, my additional hours if I have any. I'm going to fix, let's say, a transition flashing. So this is the same detail we saw earlier. There's my end result. That's the picture I'm going to send to the homeowner. This is the invoice they're going to see. They're going to see that I spent 2 hours there. I removed the old ugly, and I'll send them the picture of the old ugly lead full of junk, maybe a split in it where it was split, how it had sagged. I'm going to, they'll see that picture with the flexible flashing. They'll see the anti-pond foam. They'll see the pan metal. We always replace 2 or 3 feet of the pan metal at least on the sidewall because we want to be in control of everything there. We don't want to get called back because we missed some small inexpensive piece of material, and by not replacing it, it had a callback for us. And they'll see the batten extenders. We installed X number of batten extenders. So I had to block out the pricing because as an industry association, we can't talk about pricing, but I will just say that for me, this is a very lucrative thing to have my invoices listed and send the homeowner a picture. So there's a reason why I covered them up with green. But for me, it really is a great attribute for my billing. But in selling, it's also a great opportunity. We don't ever want to negative sell. We don't badmouth people. But FUD is a sales term I learned from my wife, and it's called fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or it stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So when I go through a proposal and I'm selling a new tile roof, I'm going to list all of the components that I'm going to use on that roof. I'm going to show the homeowner a picture along with that proposal. And I'm going to say, hey, this is the anti-ponding foam. It's going to support that flexible flashing. Here's the flexible flashing I'm going to use. Here's the component I'm going to put over the top of that juncture in the valley. So when the homeowner starts to review their proposal and they say, well, gosh, the other guy's price is better, but I don't see these things listed, I just tell them to go ask them what they're going to do. I'm using the manual to support my sales presentation, and I'm using products that are made by our manufacturers to facilitate a good installation. Gosh, ask the other guy what he's going to do. What did he say? Well, the homeowner might say, well, he said when they get to a transition piece, they just use some broken tile and shove it underneath there. And when they get to a juncture of these flashings, yeah, they're using 5-rib metal, but they said they just kind of hammer it down. They just use a big hammer, just hammer it down flush, and they can make it work. They don't have to use anything fancy. But what do they do with the valleys? Are they doing something there because we're using raised battens or we're using batten extenders? Well, again, they said they throw some broken tile in there and prop it up, and they're really quality. They glue it in there. Or maybe at the sidewalls, the same thing. They glue it or they break it. Those things, it's not negative selling. It's saying I'm doing it right. I'm using the manual. I'm using the installation instructions, which is the clay and concrete roof tile installation guide. I'm using the parts and pieces the manual and the manufacturers provide me. I'm purchasing those and I'm installing this properly. I want to compete against people doing the same thing. There's nothing wrong with getting that out there and letting people know that you're doing that. Okay, lastly, we're going to look at layout tape. We're going to look at just one component. We're not trying to teach you how to do layout today. Most of you are already familiar with it, but I really want you to see something and know, kind of a little bit from a personal standpoint. At my age, I've been roofing for a long time, and I work and train and have a lot of contact with people, my age, who have been roofing for a long time, but different from me. They had great business skills, and they built their company into something substantial where they really haven't spent time out on the roof for a long time. And maybe the bulk of their learning and their tile experience happened before components really became a part of the industry. And to them, you get into that stage where, I don't need to ride to school. We walk both ways, or I don't need these components. We make our own. And that's great. But to open up that mind a little bit, here's one example with layout. We'll get a lot of resistance to using the layout tape. But right now, there's a couple different manufacturers. We sell it to ABC Supply. What's the spacing on the name of the roof component manufacturer? They're providing it. I know that there's roofing supply houses selling product they use. I know many of our large production contractors are using layout tape. Tile Roofing Industry Alliance, we buy it because we can buy it in bulk. And if you're a small contractor, I'll get you some. But we sell it so that you don't have to go through, spend $1,000. You can buy it by the roll. So we'll just take a look at that. If you ever got big enough and you were going to buy a bunch of it, we'll give you the name of the company we use. We just want it out there to help facilitate the installation of clay and concrete tile. So a couple things before we get started on the layout. There's a requirement that we have a 3-inch headlap unless precluded by the tile design, but that's pretty rare. But most always you're going to be required to have that 3-inch headlap. And then the goal is coursing is done ideally in even increments. So it's not a requirement, but it's a goal, and it provides a benefit in both function and aesthetics. Won't go into that, but it does. And then the skill is making that happen, making sure you have your 3-inch required headlap and getting to having an even increment in the spacing of the tile. So making that happen is a skill whenever it's possible. We're going to look at 2 different ways. The most common way, and historically roofers have had a marked tape measure. So if they have using a 17-inch tile, they're going to mark their tape at 14 inches. That gives them the 3-inch headlap, and we'll show you how they're going to use that. We're also going to look at the paper layout tape. So the first thing we do with, we get up on our straight gable roof, we look at the ridge line and the even gutter. We realize, okay, we're using a 17-inch tile. We've always got to know the size of the tile we're using because that's going to determine the maximum exposure of that tile. We're going to figure out where we want to place our EAVE row first because we want the proper overhang. Different tiles have different, even tile that are 17 inches long have different thicknesses at the lugs. The slot where the EAVE riser metal goes can be at different places. So you always want to flip that tile over, do those measurements, but the first thing you're going to do, place that EAVE row and place where you want your top row, snap those lines, and now you've got a starting point. You've got your ridge and your EAVE line. Then we're going to take a look at the 2 different ways. We're going to first look at a standard marked tape measure, marked at the maximum tile exposure for the tile being installed. Again, this is a 14-inch exposure today, so my tape measure is marked at 14, 28, 42, 56, 70, all the way up to 154 inches for this example. And then we're going to go and show the paper layout tape, which is also marked at the max tile exposure of the tile being used. So one thing I'll point out right away, because I couldn't get through this without my wife pointing this out too, is because it's something that we're aware of because of issues that have come up. These I love my Fat Max, the Stanley tape measure, but they're super wide, and really it can happen with any tape measure, but it's accentuated when you have a really wide tape measure. Look at where the 3-inch mark on that tape measure falls when we're at a diagonal. Now, by nature, we're going to swing the tape to a diagonal because this is the swing tape method. So we just want to be aware of that. I'll come back to that later. So if that catches your eye and you can't avoid thinking about it, I promise you we'll come back to that detail later. So what we do, we take and put our tape measure, we butt it into our first row because it's fixed. That's our first line. And then we stretch it vertically, perpendicular, up past the top row. And if we look, 10 rows at 14 would be 140 inches. And obviously our 140-inch mark is above where we want it to be. A lot of reasons why we don't want to have a short course up there. We'd be cutting off the lugs, cutting off the nail holes. We'd be cutting. We can avoid cutting. We can avoid all those things. by simply rotating that tape over until the 140-inch mark on the tape meets that top horizontal ridgeline row that we want. At that point, we've got to do something. We've got to get down on our hands and knees and start marking a V with a crayon or a chalk and transferring the marks from our tape measure onto the underlayment, so that when we pick up our tape and take it down to the other end, we can do the same thing, go vertical, swing it, and then we got to do the same thing and transfer those marks onto the underlayment with a point so that we can then chalk lines across it. Now the point here, like I said, you know, the drawings in the manual almost always, like I said, the pipe comes through the center of the tile, through the crown of the tile, the roofs are straight gable or simple L shapes. In the real world, it's not like that. So you know the labor intensiveness of just getting down and marking all these V's. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but if it's 115 degrees in Phoenix, if it's a step you can avoid, all the better. And if you're on a house like this, that the labor intensiveness of doing that is much greater. So we want to avoid that if possible. Once we've got all those marks, it's pretty quick to chalk lines across them, and now we're ready to apply our battens. So that's using a regular marked tape measure. Now, if we use the paper tape, we're going to have the same 14-inch marks, but there's not going to be any other, there's no possibility for mistake. You know, I do pretty well with 14, 28, but once you get up to 22 rows, I don't know, I'd have to use a calculator to multiply 22 times 14 and get it figured out. And mistakes do get made. With a paper tape that's marked, you're not going to have the possibility of that mistake. We're going to get back to the same place we were. We've got our EAVE row and we've got our top row. That's where we want those two rows. We're going to use layout tape. We're going to put our first arrow right on the top of our top row, go straight up vertically, do the same thing we did with the tape measure, swing it over until that red arrow lines up on the top row. Then we do the same thing at the other end of the roof. I go up vertically first always, and then swing the tape over. And now we've got, no, we don't have to do this. We can skip that because our arrows are already on the paper tape. So very quickly, we're already to the chalking lines point. So you really can't beat that. In addition, like I said, I'll come back to this, the concern about having the tape measure, some people will say, is that really a concern? You know, I'm not a nickel and dime guy when it comes to stuff like this, but if you really want to know, ask your roof consultant. He's going to say yes. And the fear is that if you accidentally have a row or two that are below maximum exposure, it's something a roof consultant, or I should say above maximum exposure, it's something a roof consultant really can't ignore if it's something he put his tape measure to. So we want to avoid that. You avoid that when there's just a single arrow. So it's very hard to make a mistake with this tape. I won't say it's impossible. Nothing's impossible, but it's very difficult to make a mistake with this paper tape. It doesn't stretch. The arrows always point the same way. We have 3 different sizes in stock, 14-inch for 17-inch tile, 13.5-inch for 16.5-inch tile, and then 11-inch for the Luisi 14-inch tile, all providing a 3-inch head lap. So then that tape stays behind. So it's part of the job. It'll degrade and the wind will blow it around, but you know, it stays behind there. When the roof consultant comes up and does an inspection, you know, it's kind of a topic of conversation if they haven't seen it before. But to me, that's a super efficient way. There's other aspects to that we talk about in our training that really facilitate a good installation. So that's the components we're going to talk about. But some final thoughts on tile roofing. I love tile roofing. It's been, you know, my career now really for about 25 years, totally just tile roofing. Tile roofing has great performance in wildfires from the standard of the point of safety and living in a home with a tile roof. You're safe from wildfires, the resistance to damage from wind and hail, resistance to damage from UV and freeze-thaw cycles. But most importantly, cars will glance off a tile roof, but they will penetrate right through a shingle roof. So you're much safer in a tile roof. Thank you for your attention. We're going to have an opportunity for questions if there are any. And I'll look to Lisa to see if there's anything that's come up.
Yeah, we don't have any questions at the moment. You're free. I'm going to open up the mics. And if you want to ask a question verbally, then you can do so. I know we ran a little bit longer, but we'll stay on if there are any questions. And thank you for all that attended. I'm going to send an email out, a survey, probably an hour after we end, that will have a link to the handout John mentioned. And then the YouTube video, we've had a couple people ask about being able to view this later. The video should be available within a couple days, and we'll get that up on our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to watch us again if you want, or share it with others. And I do see one question coming in. Great presentation, says Rick Olson. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
So if there are any other questions, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask it verbally, you can, or you can send it using the GoToWebinar question feature in writing.
Yeah, I will say for any of the sales reps, you know, if there's a part of this that you would like to be able to use, let me know, and we'll talk about that and make sure we can get you anything that would help you in your job. I want to thank Victor Rosas and Wade Shepard both for being my technical backup, and also Bill Jackson, who helped me out a little bit yesterday too. So appreciate that. And if there aren't any questions, then I guess we can wrap it up. Thank you guys all for being here. And if you have any questions, Rick and Lisa and I are here to help. So please let us know if we can help you out. Have a great day.